Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the QT2 podcast series, The Coaches at QT2 Systems. My name is Reem Jishi, and I'm the content director for QT2, and I would like to welcome our featured guest for today, Coach Lenny Ramsey. Welcome, Lenny.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start with the question I always do on this interview series, which is, can you tell me when you joined QT2 as an athlete?
I started with QT2 towards the end of the summer of 2016.
Okay. And then you started coaching for QT2 soon after that, correct?
I think probably around 2018.
Okay.
Or so. Yeah. A couple of years after being an athlete.
Okay. So what I want to do now, I want to back it up and talk about your career as an athlete, because it's a great story. So tell me when you first got into triathlon.
I got into triathlon probably around 2014 or so. After I'd picked up running after knee surgery, and that's a whole nother story. But after having been sedentary for quite a while, I picked up running. It turned out I really enjoyed running, and then did get injured again and decided to get myself a bike and took swimming lessons. So at this point, I'm in my mid to late 20s. So I'm definitely a late onset swimmer, but I figured why not? And I just kind of threw myself into trying a triathlon. And from there, pretty quickly realized that I gravitated towards the somewhat longer distances. So the half Ironman distances is where I really started my focus, after having done maybe a couple of Olympic distances. But again, I'm not a swimmer. And so the half Ironman seemed to kind of really pull me in. And in 2016, I was towards the end of my PhD. I just handed in my PhD thesis. I'm a neuroscientist by training. And the week after that, I went to Chattanooga to race 70.3, and completely unexpected ended up winning that amateur race, the amateur women's race at that race. But then had to go back home because I had to defend my thesis that following week. And yeah, so I wasn't really prepared for all of that. And I also was moving because I had accepted a job. I was living in St. Louis, Missouri for my PhD, and was moving up to Wisconsin to become an assistant professor. And then I did do, I think, Racine, and I also think I won that age group race as well. And I was like, well, this is not really where I want to be. I don't want to be winning races. I want to be competing. And so that's kind of when I made the decision that I wanted to at least consider taking my pro card. My coach at the time, she was great at getting me to that point, but she thought she wasn't prepared to help me through the process of becoming a professional athlete. And so she connected me with QT2. She had worked with QT2 in the past, and she knew that they had kind of like the support system to support me in trying it as a pro athlete. And that's how I connected with QT2. I got thrown into a pro camp pretty much straight away. I think it was probably around August 2016. Had a great experience. Knew I had a lot to work on, but also knew that, you know, I was going to actually take the shot. And then, so with help from Tim, I took my pro card in 2017 and started racing as a pro.
Okay. So what was it about QT2 that drove you, like that called to you to start coaching there?
I really trusted the system. Since my first coach had worked with QT2 in the past, she understood and used kind of a lot of like little bits from the methods that QT2 had developed. And when I switched to QT2, kind of a lot of those things kind of fell into place. The nutrition, the base building, it really resonated with me. It worked well for my body. I saw huge improvements throughout those first few years. Felt like I was at least at a place where I could compete as a mid-pack of the pro field, which was a place that I never thought I would be. And with that, also the direct one-on-one support that you get, plus the team community, the pro camps, the age group camps. You know, there's that extra bit of like building a community and feeling like you belong with the group, and you're not just on your own. Because I think training for triathlon can be pretty solitary. I mean, and in the pro field, most of us are very spread out. We don't all live in the same place and we don't all train together, but just meeting those people that were also coached by QT2, just getting together for those training camps, just gave me a real sense of community that really supported me through kind of that process of learning how to race as a pro.
Okay. So tell me about your pro experience. Do you remember your first race as a pro, what it was like?
My first race was 70.3 Galveston, which is a horrible race for me to begin with. I don't do flat very well. I'm someone that loves the hills and the mountains. And if you've never been to Galveston, the bike course is a straight out and back on a highway. It is flat as a pancake and it's windy. Plus, I'm not a great swimmer, still not a great swimmer. It's a work in progress at all times. And I had never raced in the pro field before, obviously, but now all of a sudden, instead of being surrounded by people that, of all swimming abilities, there's this small group of maybe 15 or 20 women, and that gun went off and everybody just booked it. And I just looked up and I was like, oh no. I'm like, I haven't even started yet. So yeah, so by the time the run is kind of my strength, but by the time I hit the run, I had mentally exhausted myself and I just had nothing left. So that first race was definitely a rough one. But it's only up from there.
So what was your conversation? So you worked with Tim Snow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So after that race, what was your conversation with Tim like?
I mean, I think he thought I was being too hard on myself, which maybe I was. We knew that my swim was going to be a work in progress, but it was also a mental switch. And I think he really helped me through that. And that is, as a female racing, even in the amateur field, right, you always start with having groups in front of and behind you. There's faster men around. And so there's always people that you're passing. So there's the people that outswim me that I'm passing. There's people that age groups ahead of me that I'm passing. So both on the bike. So, I'd be like a middle of the pack swimmer maybe, but I'd get onto the bike and I'd start passing people. And every person you pass, it's a little bit of a win, right? And then on the run, I'd be passing people constantly. And that's just a little bit of a win. But now the pro men start ahead of us. Well, there's no way I'm going to pass any of the pro men, right? The pro women I start with, if I'm out of the water as one of the last ones, then all I can do is hope that I catch a couple of them on the bike. But instead of passing, hundreds of people, I'm passing 1, 2, 3 people. And so I think what Tim said is instead of thinking of it as a penny in the bucket for each person I pass, I have to consider that it's a quarter or maybe even $1 in the bucket for every person I pass. And that was a mental switch that took me a while to get there.
Okay. So, all right. So Galveston was your first. Talk about like you're up because I think you said that in your first couple of years as racing a pro that a lot changed. You really improved the time. So talk to me about that.
And part of it is just starting to learn that you do belong, right? I mean, that's a hard mental switch to make because especially you come from a world where you're used to winning and now all of a sudden I was definitely not winning. Mm-hmm. And so that first season was really all about just finding my groove. And I did okay, not great, kind of the middle of the pack pro for some of those half Ironmans. And it wasn't until the year after that that I decided that I wanted to race a full. And that's kind of where that was something that I had put off for quite a while because it seemed like such a long race. But I had been told by Tim and others that it was also the distance kind of for me, that my body is very aerobic, that I probably would do well at that distance. But Tim had also told me very honestly, he's like, only do it if you really, really want to, because you're going to hate your life during. So you better have a good reason to be there. I think I then decided to do Lake Placid I want to say in 2018. And that's where I felt like I landed. Then I had that year, I had a couple of top 5 finishes. 2019, I had a couple of 3rd place finishes in kind of like that full Ironman distance on the harder courses, because that's kind of where I do best. Just mountainous courses, hilly courses, things like that.
Okay. So I think I met you for the first time at QT2 coaches party up in Boston. And at that point you were given the stick. Right?
I still have that stick. I still have that stick.
I always wondered how you got that on the plane. Like, how in the world did you manage to take that with you?
They didn't want to let me take it on the plane. We handed it to the lady to check it in because it was too big to take on board. And she just looked at it and she's like, but there might be things living in it. And I was like, well, package it up. And this guy that also worked there, he comes up, he's like, oh, we'll just wrap a bag around it and we'll just check it in. It'll be fine. And I was like, okay, it'll be fine. And it made it.
So, all right. So the stick was, if I'm remembering right, the award was like like you would never guess that this person is as amazing as they are because they don't talk about themselves, right? Is that, I mean,
that's kind of what it was, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was right after I had done IRONMAN Lanzarote. And I ran a 2:58 marathon there. And ran myself into third place. So that's definitely still one of the races that I'm most proud of. I think things just kind of fell into place. And to consider, I had gotten there a week or so before the race and I got on my bike and it's insanely windy. I thought the hills were what makes it a hard race, but it was so windy and these roads are narrow and there's cars on it. And I get a few miles outside of town and I pulled off the road and I called Tim and I'm like crying. I'm like, I don't think I can ride my bike here. And he's like, well, good thing you have another week. And I was like, well, okay. But yeah, it all fell into place. It was the longest bike ride I've ever done during that race. And I kept on looking at my clock being like, oh, I should be done like 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago. Yeah. But it's just such a slow course that I was not, compared to the others, I wasn't slow. So so then and then just pulled together kind of a good run and surprisingly, I knew I had it in me. I just didn't think it was going to come out that day. And it came out, and that's still definitely one of the races I'm most proud of pulling that together.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, it is something about Ironman. Like it's like, well, what's your PR? Well, it kind of doesn't. I mean, like there's fast courses and then there's not fast courses. So hills and hills, like you don't see that combo a lot. It's like usually you get the winds because it's flat or by the water, or you get the hills. But yeah, to be hit with both of them, that's where I'm going. So that's it. So when into the run did you realize that you were having the run?
That was actually funny because I'm just running. I did have my mom, her partner, and my brother had come out to watch me race. And so they were on the sidelines and they were kind of telling me that I was running my way up. And I'm just like, whatever. I knew I was having a good run. I knew I was running well. But I must have had, I don't know, must have been at least 2/3 in. Maybe I had a 10K left. And all of a sudden the bike guy pops in next to me and he's like, oh, I think you're in third place. And the last I had known, I was at least in fifth.
Okay.
And so I looked at him, I'm like, I don't think so. And he's like, I'm pretty sure. And I'm like, still don't think so. Like, okay. So, but then, then you have the bike person next to you and then you can't slow down because I'm like, well, now everybody's looking. So now I kind of have to stick with it. Yeah. And so, then at that point, I just kind of gutted it out. And I'm like, if he's wrong, he's wrong, but at least I might as well try for it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, then, when you finish, you're like, well, wherever I placed, I raced as well as I could. Like that is
exactly.
Extra, extra
sure.
motivation, having the bike next to you. So, well, that's wow, what a great day. So I get why Tim gave you that award. That was very, very well earned. And having it home, I was like, when you got, I'm like, oh my God, we should do that thing. So it's traveled with you.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit before I hit your coaching, though. I think something that you mentioned was that we're a PhD student, and now making the decision to race Ironman is, a huge time commitment at any level. But as a pro, that's a ton. There's a lot of pros that don't do anything else, right? That's not you though, right? So how do you spend your days?
Back then, right after around the time that I started as a pro, I just had accepted a job as an assistant professor. And I'm not going to lie, my schedule was absurdly packed at that point, trying to balance all of it, a new course load, new kind of lab to set up. I had just gotten married, but my wife was living in Denver. I was in Wisconsin. So we were doing the long distance thing. So that whole year was a whirlwind. I don't really remember any of it. It just kind of happened. But, you know, at some point I found my rhythm in that. We did end up eventually moving because of my wife's job. And then when COVID hit, we moved to Houston. And when COVID hit, you know, being in the city was just not for us. And so right now we're in Arkansas. We moved to Arkansas. And I work full time. I kind of always have, and I really like working. Right now I work more in faculty development and in kind of DEI, supporting women faculty in STEM, in the sciences. And I absolutely love it. You know, to me, there's this, I like to use my brain in what I'm kind of trained for, even though, you know, I was trained as a neuroscientist, but I really love working with faculty. I love seeing the payoff to make the academy in the end, it's all about payoff to the students, but to me that just has a personal bigger payoff. I love racing as an athlete, and it's a huge hobby of mine. It's a huge time commitment, so my days are very packed, but to me there is a sense that racing as an athlete is kind of a selfish thing to do, because I do it all for me. Doesn't make it any less valuable for me as a person, but I do it for me. And not for anything else. Whereas I feel like with the work, I can put a lot of energy into stuff that will pay off at a bigger scale. And I want to keep doing that. I always want to keep doing that. And I have never wanted to give that up. And has that impacted my abilities as an athlete? Maybe. And has my, 20 to 30 hours of training impacted my work? Probably, right? But, you know, I've found my ways to be able to balance it to a certain extent. And my days are scheduled. You know, I make my lunches on Sundays so that so I don't have to think about that during the week. I get up at 5-7 days a week to kind of maintain that rhythm. I work out before and after work. Thankfully, my job is flexible enough that, you know, when the days are shorter, I can go for a run in the middle of the day. If my meetings allow, so I can be a little bit flexible during the week. Pretty much all of my bike time is on the trainer, just for time efficiency. And once the weather warms up a little, I'll definitely go outside on the weekends. But yeah, the schedule is packed. But I'm lucky that I have a very supportive wife. She travels for work quite a bit, and she works long hours. So, you know, we were able to kind of balance that. And then we try to make time. We focus on making time for each other in the weekends. You know, before or after my bike rides, but definitely on Sundays, which are usually, you know, long run days, but that leaves a lot of the rest of the day. So we make sure that we spend quality time together in those moments.
So you're balancing racing.
Trying. I don't know if there's trying.
But all right, so let's throw one more layer on top of it now, which is why we're here today, right? So you coach.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you start coaching?
I started coaching probably a couple of years after I started training as an athlete. So probably around 2015, 16 is when I started coaching. I got certified in 2016, and I'd probably started coaching a little bit before that. But, you know, for me, it just brings together kind of the best of all the worlds. Like, I love the athlete side of it, but there's also a part of me that loves teaching. And you know, being a scientist, there's a lot of science that goes into this. And there's a lot of, and kind of the neuroscience, the cognitive neuroscientist to me also loves human behavior. So what drives a person? And I feel like I can bring all of that kind of together in that coaching.
Yeah. So as a coach, how much do you think that your coaching style, how much do you think that was influenced by having Tim as your coach and being part of QT2?
100%. I think a large portion of how I coach and how I think about coaching was driven by how Tim coached me and approached coaching me. Tim, for me, was not only a great coach in figuring out how far he could push my body, but also a very good coach in terms of listening to me and my mental state, helping me balance training with work. You know, when there are days that I couldn't do as much, he worked around that very well. And, you know, when I had my mental breakdowns, which happen every once in a while, he was always there for me. He always answered the phone. He was always the person to kind of talk me off that ledge and kind of, you know, talk to me about not being so hard on myself. And I think that's one of those things that a lot of us do, right? We're in this sport because we want to get the best out of ourselves, but that also means that sometimes we're too hard on ourselves when it comes to, giving yourself a little bit of leeway and knowing that when you're mentally stressed that your body's not going to respond. Or maybe, my cycle plays a role in how I respond to training. And sometimes Tim knew me to the point where I would have a horrible day and I would be on the phone with him. I'm like, I just can't do it. I don't know what's happening. And he'd be like, where are you in your cycle? And I'm like, oh, it's coming. And then, so so he just knew me really well. And I always really appreciated that. Right. And he was able to balance the being very serious about training, but also knowing when to back off. And then obviously, the QT2 system of training, it really worked very well to bringing me to where I am right now. And, especially those first few years being such a new athlete when it comes to this sport, my body, needed kind of a lot of that kind of base building. And he kind of knew how to really set that up without pushing my body too far, because I am kind of injury prone, especially on the run. And he put a lot of effort into balancing that and really keeping an eye on that. And I think I learned a lot from that.
Mm-hmm. So now as a coach, is there a certain type of athlete that you do work with or that you like to work with?
I work with a little bit of everything. I currently coach duathlete. I coach triathletes, both longer and shorter distances. I briefly coached someone for gravel cycling, because that's something I picked up a couple of years ago. I currently coach all women, and that is something that I really enjoy. Not something that I necessarily picked specifically, but it just kind of worked out that way. And I really love it. I think, there's a lot we can do for women in sport at all levels. The people that I coach, they're all competitive at their own kind of personal level, right? They want to that's the thing that I care about. Like, I want you to want to get the best out of yourself. That doesn't mean to me that you need to be a Kona athlete. So I will coach anybody at any level as long as you want to get better and you're willing to put in the work. It's not as much fun to coach someone that only does half of their sessions and, or only does kind of what they want, because then kind of, I'm not sure what I'm doing, why I'm there. Yeah. So it's most fun to coach people that really want to get better at whatever distance or whatever, sport that might be. And then work together to get there. And I think women are a little bit different than men in terms of the mental support that they sometimes need, the confidence boost that they sometimes need. And I feel like that is something, I'm not someone that's going to hold your hand through all of it. That's not me as a coach, but I'm willing to push you. But I'm also, I also believe that it's important to recognize when people do things well, and even the little things, right? Or when someone's having a bad day, that's okay. And they still gutted it out, right? That's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think people need to be praised for that, because I think we all crave a little bit of that recognition, especially from a coach.
Yeah. So when you have, anyone that's going through and putting in the time and trying really hard, at some point though, they're gonna question whether that's enough, whether they're enough, right? And they have their doubts about whether or not they're able to do what they set out to do. So how do you respond to that?
I think a part of it is just always being available to talk to your athletes, right? I've gone through a lot. I might race at the pro level, but a lot of your experiences and my experiences are probably not all that different. And our mental experiences are not all that different. Even me at the pro level, there's many times that I completely doubt myself or the choices that I'm making or my ability at the sport, right? So I don't think that's different for any of us or for many of us. And I think, being open about that and having those conversations and being open to having those conversations and sharing that they're not alone in these thoughts, but that I fully believe in their ability, and also showing them the improvement that they've made over the past few years, because, improvement is gradual. So people often don't realize how much they've improved over the years, and kind of you can show that. We have the data to show that, right? So kind of just different approaches to different people, but I think really I think it's okay for me to share my own vulnerabilities. It's okay for me to share kind of my experiences when they relate to yours as well. And I think we should be open to having those conversations, whatever it might be about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it's sometimes I always wonder, like when, I work with, my coach is a professional triathlete as well. but she seems to get it, anyway, even though I've never been a pro, I'm never going to be a pro, but the experience are still shared. It's like, yeah, I went through that too, it's like, all right, okay.
Yeah.
that makes me
I mean, to me, when I during like my first couple of years of racing as a pro, it was so important to at the beginning of at like the start of a pro race, that even the people that were kind of expected to win, to see how nervous some of them were,
Yeah.
right, and yet approachable. And to me, that was very comforting, knowing that it wasn't just me, right? And obviously, it's not just me, but you sometimes feel like it's just you, and just having someone come out and be like, no, I'm right there with you, right? I might be the person that will win this race, but I'm just as nervous as you are. Or I might be a person that's not competitive at all, but I still have set expectations for myself. So I'm still, having the same feelings and going through the same things that you are. And I think that's important to kind of realize that.
Yeah, for sure. So, what would you say your biggest coaching challenge has been?
I mean, it's so person specific, right? For me, it's really hard when someone loses focus or loses motivation. You can talk through all of that, but if there's reasons, and sometimes it's just life that changes, right? People can be really hard on themselves when life priorities change. Feeling like they should be doing better with their workouts and stuff like that. But I think as a coach, at some point, you also have to be honest and be like, hey, your life is changing, which means that we need to set different priorities in terms of your athletics, right? And even as a coach, when you see potential in someone, it's hard to take that step back and be like, you know what, maybe we should just not do those races this year, and we need to focus on something different, right? And I think it's important as a coach to realize that and recognize that it's not always about you. Sometimes it's better to pause, put an athlete on pause, or maybe take a break, or maybe, stop working as a coach with someone when it's not in their benefit.
Right.
And sometimes, it's figuring out what motivates someone, but I think sometimes it's just about life, and life isn't always about the sport.
Yeah. I know. It's amazing because the sport is something, you sort of hit it. The triathlon is really personal. We race because something is driving us to race, right? But life changes, and sometimes there's other things that are more important, but if you love it enough, you come back to it. It's a cycle. I always think it's good. Like when I see my athletes, they take breaks and they really miss it. I was like, that's good, because sometimes they take breaks and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm done, and that was one thing, like when COVID happened, I always wondered, like, I don't think I lost anyone. Like they all came back, they missed it so much. So I think that's really an exciting thing, but yeah, life goes through the way. And just to be given I think sometimes when people make those decisions, they're going through the motions because they don't want to say it, or they feel bad about making it. So sometimes as a coach, the most important thing is to say, it's okay.
Yeah.
And you're ready.
I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes, like, ending a coaching relationship can feel like a breakup, right? Like it's someone that you've worked together with very closely, that knows you really well. And having to end that can be really hard. And so kind of and sometimes I think as a coach, you can see it coming, and that it's time, and then maybe it's your job as a coach to kind of initiate that versus putting it all on the athlete.
Yeah, no, very true. So flipping to the other side, what would you say is a coaching success?
I don't have one specific one, but I think, especially like, for example, all the athletes that I'm coaching right now, I've coached all of them for at least more than one season. And I think I love watching their year-to-year progression, or even, the goals that they come with when I start with them, and just over months, just seeing them improve. I think there's so many little things that as a coach you can bring to someone in terms of racing schedules with QT2, also with the nutrition, and just watching them thrive. To me, that's all I do. That's why I do it, right? And the excitement that you get from the athletes when they, surpass their own expectations. And I think, and that obviously there's like, the people coming back from crazy injuries, and there's the juggling the crazy schedules, but just really seeing that pay off, to me, that's why I do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be a passion project for you because otherwise why do it in addition to all those other things you have going on? So
Yes.
you gotta love
True.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely do.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Lenny. I thank you for taking this time in your, I know, very busy, busy life. I really appreciate you doing this. And we'll connect again soon. For those of you out there watching, if you are loving this video and the series, just make sure that you subscribe to our channel too, so you can get notified when we post some new videos out there. So
Yes.
all
Perfect.
right.
Thank you, Reem.
All right. Thanks, Lenny.
Bye.
Bye.